Hello and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. And today's guest, folks, I'm very intrigued, and I mean that in a very literal way. I'm very intrigued by what we're going to be discussing and what might emerge out of this. The idea behind the notion of the intersection, I think, of quantum physics, reality, business, life. I mean, we've got so many balls in the air that we have difficulty making sense of in many ways. My guest today, Pam Buchanan, is the founder and CEO of Quantum Sense. I'll introduce her more specifically here in just a moment. But I want to just kind of set the stage here. I'm going to do something that I almost never do. I'm going to read directly from a section of her website here, because I think this does far more justice to an introduction than I could possibly do myself. And then I'll bring Pam on to begin the conversation here. Quote, end quote, Pam's personal and professional life is marked by her innovative mindset. And that's one thing that we're going to really, I think, have benefit of here. In the 80s, she was among the first to introduce mutual funds to the banking industry and played a key role in identifying unicorn startups for public markets. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Her career, not that that wasn't, but her career highlights, including serving as the managing director of Nasdaq for over 15 years, where she built and maintained relationships with pre-IPO companies, founders, and C-level execs. And these included such people as you're probably familiar with, as Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. And before her tenure at Nasdaq, she spent nearly 20 years at Deutsche Bank, managing financial institutions and independent representatives in mutual fund transactions. Now, and it goes on, and there's a lot of other stuff. And as long as I'm talking about her website, I'm going to invite every single one of you that are listening right now to go to this website, thequantumsense.com. It is one of the most elegant and one of the most beautiful and one of the most fascinating websites I've come across in a long, long time. It's incredibly well done. So, Pam, I want to just welcome you to the show. I am so looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm looking forward to this conversation and, hopefully educating the audience on some new insights.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, this notion of quantum sense, and I'm going to lead this with a question around, when you hear the term the soul of business, what does that evoke? But I want to migrate and segue into the notion of quantum sense here, because I think that there is a very interesting link around this. So I'll just start with, when you hear the term the soul of business, what gets kicked up for you?
Well, and I hear that term, it's about the people, right, behind the company. And individually, we each have unique souls. So, what is the sole purpose of that company? What are they bringing to the universe, the world, in a positive way? So that is really, is there a soul to the company, or is it driven more by ego, because it's really soul versus ego? Is it driven by ego and ego themes, right? Is it purely about the money and profit and other things that may not be in alignment with the soul? So, what are you doing to help your employees, lean more into that soul driven way versus the ego driven way? What programs do you have in place to help them come to realize that really, once you tap into that soul, positive and abundance comes your way, right? So That's what the soul of business really is. It's about the individual people, and it does start at the top. What are those CEOs, founders, managers? What are they providing for their teams, and how are they managing? And taking a hard look at themselves.
That's the piece that's interesting to me, taking a hard look at themselves. That leadership question always kind of grabs my attention pretty quickly. I've spent over 40 years working in leadership development around the world.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, leadership's an inside-out process. I mean, if you're really doing it well.
Yep, absolutely.
in your tenure, both at Nasdaq, but in Deutsche and a couple of other firms that you were with, I mean, you were in traditional corporate America, quote unquote, sort of positions.
Absolutely. Hmm.
What was the catalyst that generated an interest in moving to where you are now with this notion of quantum sense? Because this is a major shift in trajectory from the outside looking in.
Yes, yes. I think I was always interested in, the soul and quantum and life being a little bit different. There was more to life than I had these fascinating jobs, right? From the outside, as you said, they were fascinating. Yet something was missing. I was in it for the fight, as a woman in the 80s, taking on
Oh,
upper
yeah.
level positions. And, luckily I had a wonderful career and people surrounding me. But I was always interested in what else was out there. What really was going to satisfy me. And it wasn't the superficial stuff, the ego stuff, I call it, that really satisfied me. What is deep into my soul? And even though the job was fascinating, interesting, there were still pieces missing. And so I don't want to call it a hobby, but, outside of work, I would read books by Deepak Chopra and others, Wayne Dwyer, and just was fascinated by that and always have been. So I think that was always part of me, but it was more of a hobby or side interest, if you will. I definitely had insights and contributed with kind of my, soul self. It was never driven by my ego self. So, and people always thought that was different. They would always say, "Oh, Pam's so nice and helpful, and she's not really competitive. She wants everyone to win." So any new person coming in, I was always very helpful. And I'm like, isn't that the way everybody is? So I never believed, I never believed that I was competing. It was a team effort, but why not help others? I wasn't in fear-based mode. So I call it also fear-based mode versus love-based mode, right? So you're either driven by the fear, like, oh my God, there's not enough scarcity, right? Or you're driven by love and abundance. I was always driven by love and abundance. And it confused me that everyone was so competitive. Now, you probably will be saying like, well, you competed against the New York Stock Exchange, Nasdaq versus New York Stock Exchange to win a deal. And yes, I did. So I was competitive in a certain extent, loyal to my company, right? So when I say competitive, I probably mean within the corporation, with my colleagues, if you will. But yes, I was wanting to win each deal. And it was like the Super Bowl every day, one winner, one loser. But it was tough on your being, right? To be at that high intensity. So that led me more and more to, how can I live a more soul driven life? Because that competition puts you into an ego mode.
It certainly does. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with competition as long as it's harnessed in an effective manner.
Exactly.
My experience.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's not, and it becomes, like you said, both a zero-sum process, but it's also consequentially damaging to the people involved in a very fundamental way.
Yes, absolutely.
Before we actually began, recording for this, we had a little preamble conversation, and you mentioned something that kind of caught my attention here. You said your word of the year was depth, and I was fascinated by that because my wife does that every year too. She sets a word for herself, and that becomes kind of the operating word for the year.
Yeah.
And in terms of the word depth, how does this tie into what you're finding going on today in the work that you're doing, both personally, but also, as the CEO of Quantum Sense, the work you're doing with your clients? Where does depth come into play with this?
So really, it's asking more and more questions, going deeper than the surface level. What I find is people really do take things at the surface level. whether it's that headline in the news, whether it's just one person's opinion, but ask more questions within yourself. It doesn't even have to, now we can research via Google. You can search out people. You can, ask experts questions, but ask the questions and go deeper. And then that comes to also yourself, not just the world around you. Like, why is this happening? Could this change? Because that's what entrepreneurs do, right? They ask the question of how this could be better. There's another way to do this, or really inventing a whole new paradigm, right? Like a new product or something that we've never used before. I mean, you go back, think about it. Did people really want to go from horse and buggy to, a motorized vehicle? They probably, if we talked to them, probably thought, oh, that's strange. Why would we do that?
Yeah.
So, everything new that all of a sudden becomes mainstream, then we take for granted. But, take a look at how that was developed. How did we get to the place we are now? And then where do we want to be? Where do we want to go? And hopefully it's all driven by the positive and good intent, right? Not the ego. So every time you catch yourself in that ego state, in that fear-driven state, in the negative state, try to stop yourself and say, no, let's do it out of good intent, out of positive intent, better for the whole, right? I want to do better for the whole. And, we're all dependent on each other, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're all interdependent. As you said earlier, business affects all of us, not one of us isn't affected by a product, a company out there. And so they are a very important part of society. And let's go deep. So that's what I always start with. Let's go deep and let's learn how to be more curious. Let's talk about curiosity. Let's get radical here.
Radical curiosity.
So, it's just a way of training your mind to every situation you come into to start observing in a different way. And then that's when I take them into their senses too. Like, what are you observing? Because the senses lead to your energetic being.
Now, let's talk about that a little bit, because I've been always, we've got 5 senses, and I'm holding up 10 fingers, but I see, feel, hear, taste and touch, and smell. And we can get captured, in my experience here, and this is just solely my experience, but we get captured by what our senses tell us is real. And that capturing can lock us into a box pretty quickly, in my experience. And this is where constraints of possibility occur, because I look at my bank account and I go, well, I can't have that because it says this, or I can't do that because, and then I hear people talk about the danger out there or whatever it might be. And to the degree that I'm captured by my senses and lose connection to my imagination, and where I'm going with this is, I think it was Carl Jung that mentioned this. The imagination is the gateway to the soul.
Yes.
And when I begin to use my imagination, and every one of us has an imagination, we begin to tap into possibilities that are outside of what our senses are telling us is what we should have, could have, would have. And it's that possibility migration that I'm interested in. And that is, I think, is a large part of the work that you do, is you work with people to begin tapping into the soul so that possibilities emerge. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. The senses, what I teach about the senses is each of us sense differently, correct? Like, let's say you find the smell of lavender not appealing, right? And let's say I find it, maybe the majority of people find it relaxing, let's say. But each of us have a different interpretation of that, right?
Yep.
So surround yourself in an environment. What I'm trying to connect the senses to is their environment that they're in. And your senses will tell you that. So let's say that we walk into a room that is bright red and maybe dark furniture, that probably would lower your energy, or it could, enlighten your energy, right? Just depending on how you view those colors. But for the most of us, it probably would be a little too bright and sensory overload. So let's say that you lived in a house that had dark walls and red furniture, let's say, or brown furniture. What is that doing to your mood?
Yeah.
And your emotions tied to that. So after a hard day's work, you go home and you are then, let's say you had a challenging day. You need to reset. You need to calm your nervous system. Is that going to calm your nervous system? No, that's going to put it into fear mode or flight mode, or, the negative, right? So what a coat of paint does, like paint your walls white, bring in some blue calming furniture, let's just say, and it affects you. That affects you. So it's the little changes too that you need to pay attention to. So paying attention to your environment also heightens your intuition, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's say you walk into a party and you don't get a good feeling. It's all that you're bouncing off the energies of other people, and someone else goes in and doesn't feel that, right? But you sense that, the senses, the energy, you're sensing at a deeper level, because let's say, it's a party full of distinguished professionals. Why would you get this like energetic feeling that it's not a healthy place to be? You should tap into that intuition more so than, let's say, the title or the name of the event, and not let anyone discourage you from that true feeling that you were experiencing, or that energetic being that you were really interacting with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's where curiosity comes into play.
Yes.
It's kind of like, why am I feeling this way around here? It's, it's objectively looks safe.
Yes, exactly. Objectively, but there's something going on. And so that's also what I mean by deeper. Don't look just at the surface. It may all look pretty and nice and packaged very nicely, but don't look at it just on the surface. Let's go deeper. And it's just, I was actually talking to a young man yesterday, and he had broken up with his girlfriend, and on the surface everything looked good, right? But you go deeper and it wasn't good, and he knew it almost from the first date, let's say. But a year and a half later, they're still dating. So, but what he was looking at, and I think our society gets caught up in, is, she's pretty, she dresses nice, she has a good job, or her family comes from a good family. They're not listening to that really energetic exchange, and their senses trying to tell them something's not right here, but yet she looks good. On paper, I like to say.
On paper, so, the deal looks great on paper.
The deal looks great on paper, and all my friends are impressed. Or sometimes, especially if you're a woman, she's a doctor or he's a doctor. Like, that's good. Well, maybe that person, there's more to that person than just the title or how they look. Is what I'm trying to get our society or people to take a deeper dive. And I'm not saying it's not great to look good. I like nice things and clothes and all of that too, but let's go deeper than that, right?
Exactly. Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me, if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm, and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks. From a leadership perspective, in the work that I do with the leaders that I coach and the teams, the execs that I interact with, I will always bring in some way, shape, or form the notion of a bow wake into the conversation. And if
Okay.
you've ever seen a boat moving through the water, and
Mm-hmm.
every boat does this. I mean, there's not a vessel that you'll find on the water that doesn't create in front of it a bow wake.
Okay.
And that bow wake is the size of the bow wake. It can be small, it can be large, but the bow wake is an indication of how much resistance the boat is causing as it moves through the water. Okay, yeah, okay, your recording has stopped because of. Okay, well, let's see here.
I'm still here.
Okay, you are okay. It says that you are still recording. Okay, so yeah, you had an incoming call that came in.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Yeah. Make sure the recording device has enough space. Okay. Okay.
Sorry
I
about
think I
that.
think I think we're good here because it indicates that you're still recording.
Okay, good. This
Okay.
is the first time I've used my cell phone for this, so I apologize, but I didn't. Yeah.
Not a this gets edited out. That's what I like about this particular
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So where I was going with this, every leader has a bow wake of sorts as they move through, and this is, where I'm going. Most leaders aren't aware of the consequence of their movement through their environment. Or I say most, many aren't aware of the consequence of the way that they move. And I don't mean literally walk, but I mean how they show up, the presence, their voice, tonality, all that stuff, which people are using their senses to decode meaning out of, that sort of thing. So when we put it in that framing in the work that you do, you've got depth, you've got curiosity, and then the third part of your component here has to do with evolution, evolving into a different state of being, a different way of being.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm using this bow wake metaphor to illustrate in the work you do what kind of awareness is brought into the conversation about what I'm generating in the environment that is producing either the results that I want or are counterproducing or are being counterproductive. Does
Mm-hmm.
that, now that's a butchered question, but
Yeah.
does that
And let me know if I'm not answering it in the way or misinterpreting the question. But I would say that is where you ask yourself, am I ego driven? And what falls under the ego? Or
perfect?
am I soul driven when I'm approaching the room, the people? How am I coming about it? It's more than I have a nice suit and coat on, right? Like tie on. It's more than that. It's the energy that you put out, and people do absorb that energy. So if you're coming at it from an ego standpoint, then the audience will see that, right? It's all about him or her. It's not about us. He may be saying and articulating the right words, but they're not coming across in a sincere way. So are you being sincere in how you approach? Is there good intent? And you really care about your employees and your people that are doing the job? And also sticking to yes, I'm a CEO, a leader of this company, but it's about the company and
Yeah.
providing services to the world, right? And I want that to come out of pure intent of good, not fear. Like, oh, let's make this change in our product because we're fearful that we're going to lose money on this side, right? Like, don't have it driven by abundance, like all the words that we talk
Yeah.
about. And if you catch yourself using words that are negative, if you will, stop yourself, right? And you're the only person that can stop yourself. So yes, people can come up to you and say, oh, well, you didn't come off very well today. And you might say, well, I thought I did. I articulated the message very clearly, succinctly, And a person would maybe have a hard time saying, well, yes, you did, but it was the intent behind it. Or, well, no, my intent was good. Well, was it really? Or was it based on fear and negativity or the ego in some way? We all have ego. I'm not saying ego is bad. It just needs to be tempered and put away in a lot of different situations, especially when you're a leader. Especially when you're a leader. And that is hard to do because I think our society has trained us to do the opposite.
The linguistics fascinate me just in terms of the meaning, because words are just symbols for experiences.
Yes.
In one sense here. And I have been struck many times, and this goes back to a question that we were talking about early on about, is the world ready for some of these conversations? I remember very early on when I was exploring just the nature of compassionate capitalism. I gave a talk at the Renaissance weekend in Charleston to a group of Wall Street bankers. And as my mother used to say, it was like flying a lead balloon through a pin factory. I mean, it did not go over well. So the idea here of evolution and where the soul comes in, the idea of soul health, a healthy soul is one that recognizes connection.
Yes.
We're all expressions of, from this is just my own bias, we're all expressions of an undifferentiated whole.
Yes.
And we are differentiated expressions of that whole.
Yes.
But we're all connected in some way.
Yes.
In the work that you do with Quantum Sense, and I love this because the company's relatively young. I mean, you founded it last year. How do you actually work with your clients to begin to position this message in a way that people kind of go, oh, there's a there?
Yes. It has been not without its challenges, right? Because when you mention soul, people think religion.
Yes, they do.
So your soul is part of your being. Religion may have taken that back in the ancient days and gotten hold of that and called the spirit, the soul. But it really, just like your physical being is part of you, even though you go to the doctor to get, a tune-up, or your mental health is part of you, even though, again, you may take medicine or go to the doctor. The same is with your soul. So the aha moment comes when I say you have programs for your physical health, gym memberships, diet consultations, healthy food in the workplace. So you're taking care of your physical body, your organ health too, I call that. Secondly, your mental health. So now finally they're taking care of the employee's mental health. And mental health days is a phrase that people use and is popular. And yes, they have, insurance now covers therapists and, mental health medication. Whereas in the past, it did not. So you've added the second leg of the stool with the mental health. And maybe you could be doing more because it is more complex, right? But the third leg of the stool is soul health. It's your soul. So we've taken and focused in society on our physical. I would say our physical health is pretty fine-tuned. I mean, we have doctors now. You have a heart issue, you can have open heart surgery tomorrow and find many heart surgeons, right? The same for most of your organ health. It's the mental health, the nervous system now is getting looked at, how it's tied to emotions. And that does cross over into your soul a little bit because the nervous system is part of, entering into the soul health, right? Because your nervous system has to allow that to happen. And obviously your body has to be healthy. If your body isn't healthy, then you are in survival mode, right? So that is important because we come into life in this human form. And I'm by no means, and that's why I have a team of experts that I work with also, but I'm by no means, a doctor and can articulate, a healthcare plan for you. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, you have your team that takes care of your physical health. You have your team that takes care of your mental health, but where's your team that takes care of your soul health? And let's start looking at it differently, because your soul health is connected to your cellular being also,
Mhm.
right?
It is.
So it's this cellular health that we're now digging deep down into. And in fact, we're looking at sound vibrations, right? You're seeing more and more, just in the past 5 years, more and more of the music. They're binaural beats.
Yep.
There's also a frequency wave that has different frequencies that this frequency affects, in hertz levels. This affects your heart. This affects your, nervous system this way. So there's a lot of different modalities that are coming to the forefront that really are going to be categorized as your soul health.
Beautiful.
And then that leads to your soul purpose. So if you look at it in 3 parts and then take it from what we know, right? And we all know our physical health because we can visually see it. What we're doing too is we're taking the invisible to make it visible. And that's what I've dedicated my career to. I've been in, if you're in finance or trading and whatever, that's kind of an invisible, construct, right? And then obviously trading and taking companies public, again, that is a little bit harder to explain. So hopefully I'm taking some of my skills that I used in my corporate career to, this platform and saying, let's dig deep. Let's go past the physical and the mental and let's talk soul. And
Beautiful.
It's not about religion, and that I do say that's the number one objection I get if I get turned down by companies is it's too tied to religion. And I try to explain that it's not. And I will say, even though the company was formed, I've been, at this a little bit longer in terms of, touching base and putting it all together. I have found that society is loosening the tie between, your soul and religion. So, yeah.
Pam, I've loved this conversation. I could keep going forever on this, and I know that we both have other things that we need to be attending to right now. Where can people find out more about what you're up to?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can take a look at my LinkedIn, also my personal LinkedIn and my corporate LinkedIn, which is the Quantum Sense, and then obviously my website. But I welcome conversations. So, let's have a conversation, and a dialogue. And I would love to work, with employees, but I'm also willing to work individually within the company. So please reach out to me and let's just start the dialogue.
Perfect. Folks, the website is thequantumsense.com, not to be confused with quantumsense.com. Make sure you get the in there, thequantumsense.com. Speaking with Pam Buchanan today. Pam, again, I can't thank you enough. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely. And folks, tune in on the next episode. And before you get to that next episode, between now and then, I want you to find a way in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. You're going to find your life works, and those around you, their lives will work a whole lot better as well. Nothing in nature is serving as a center of accumulation. It all works through distribution. Everything flows. And until next time, I'll see you later. Take care.